My name is Sarah, and I've never been a fan of motels. They always give me a strange feeling like you're just passing through, never really meant to be there. But I was driving late one night, and the highway signs for motels were few and far between. When I saw the Rosewood Motel, I knew I didn't have a choice. The lobby smelled like old carpet and coffee. The desk clerk, a young man named Aaron, barely looked up when I approached. "One room?" he asked. "Yes, please, just for the night." He handed me a key without saying a word. Room 103. As I walked down the hall, I noticed the place had a strange, silent quality. No TV sounds, no voices. The light fixtures flickered above me. Room 103 was small but cozy. The bed was made, the curtains drawn tight. But there was something off about the walls. They were covered in old, yellowed newspaper clippings. Some so faded I couldn't read them. I tried to ignore it. I was too tired to care. At 3:22 a.m., I woke up to a soft knock on the door. I didn't know why, but I felt compelled to open it. Standing there was a man I didn't recognize. He was dressed in old-fashioned clothes, like he stepped out of another time. His face was pale, almost ghastly, but his smile was warm. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said. "I just wanted to check if you needed anything." I was taken aback. I'm fine, thank you." He nodded and turned to walk away. But something in the back of my mind told me something wasn't right. As soon as I closed the door, I glanced at the clock. 3:23 a.m. The man was still standing in the hallway, staring at me. I felt my heart stop. I had only turned away for a second. The door slammed shut behind me. I turned and looked at the bed. It wasn't mine anymore. The sheets were ripped. The furniture was thrown around the room. The walls were now covered in fresh clippings, each with my name on it. There was one in the center. Sarah. Checked in at 10:45 p.m. Left without paying. Final reservation. I stumbled back, terrified, and turned to the door to leave, but it was locked. Through the cracks in the wall, I could see the man from earlier. He was staring straight at me, his eyes wide and wild, and then I heard the familiar sound of a knock. The one that would never let me leave. My name is Greg, and I'm a writer. After a long week of deadlines, I decided to escape the city for a weekend retreat. I pulled into a small town off the highway and found a quiet place called the Old Lantern Motel. It looked like it was stuck in the past. Vintage signage, faded wallpaper, and a rickety old swing on the porch. But I didn't care. It was perfect for some peace and quiet. The manager, an elderly man named Mr. Fletcher, checked me in. He didn't say much, just handed me the key to room 205. "Don't forget to sign the guest book," he said, his eyes strangely intense. I nodded and took the key. The room was simple, just what I needed. But when I looked to the side, I saw something odd on the nightstand. A guest book. It was old, yellowed pages, and cracked leather, almost like something out of a horror movie. Curious, I flipped through the pages. The entries were filled with names and dates, but there was something unsettling about the handwriting. They weren't just names, they were descriptions. Emily, checked in 1982, the last guest to stay before the fire. John, left without paying, took more than his share of the wine. And then I saw an entry, written just a few days ago. Greg, stayed for one night. Room 205, checked in at 6:45 p.m. Left without saying goodbye. I froze. I hadn't signed the guest book yet, but somehow, my name was there. I quickly turned to the last page, but it was already filled with my handwriting. Greg, stayed for one night. Room 205, checked in at 6:45 p.m. Left without saying goodbye. Shaking, I grabbed my bag and ran downstairs. Mr. Fletcher was sitting behind the desk, staring at me. "I see you've read the guest book," he said, his voice low. I nodded, speechless. It's a family tradition, he continued. When you stay here, you're written in the book, forever. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. It's already too late, son. I ran to my car and sped off, but as I passed the entrance, I saw something in my rearview mirror, the Guestbook. It was sitting on the passenger seat next to me. My name is Laura, and I work as a traveling sales rep. That means I spend more nights in motels than in my own bed. Most are forgettable, just a place to crash for the night, but I will never forget the Silver Pines, and it was late when I checked in. The woman at the front desk handed me the key to room 206, but as she did, she hesitated. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine. Keep the Do Not Disturb sign on the door all night. I frowned. Why? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Just trust me. A weird request, but I was too tired to argue. The room itself was nothing special: stained carpet, a TV that barely worked, a musty smell in the air. I locked the door, flipped the Do Not Disturb sign over, and collapsed onto the bed. At 3:10 a.m., the knocking started. Knock, knock, knock. It was soft at first, almost polite. I groaned and pulled the pillow over my head. Probably someone drunk knocking on the wrong door. Then it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, from inside the room. I shot up, heart hammering. The sound was coming from the closet. The knob rattled. Something was trying to get out. I scrambled out of bed, grabbed my phone, and turned on the flashlight. The closet door was slightly open, but all I could see was darkness. Then, a whisper. Let me out. I bolted, yanked open the motel room door, and ran straight to the front desk. The woman was still there, waiting. She didn't look surprised. You opened the door, didn't you? She asked. I shook my head frantically. No, but something was in there. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Good. If you had opened it, you wouldn't be standing here right now. I packed my bags and left before sunrise. Later, I looked up the Silver Pines in online. It had burned down 10 years ago, and room 206, it didn't exist anymore. My name is Eric. I was driving cross-country when exhaustion forced me to pull into a small roadside motel called the Crescent Lodge. It was the kind of place that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s, but it was cheap, and I was too tired to care. The man at the front desk gave me a key marked room 303. His hands shook as he passed it over. We closed the office at midnight, he muttered. Don't leave your room after that. Weird, but whatever. I just needed a few hours of sleep. I found room 303 at the end of a long, dimly lit hallway. As I slid the key into the lock, a wave of nausea hit me. The air was thick too still, like the room hadn't been opened in years. Inside, everything was wrong. The walls were a dull, peeling green, but the furniture was coated in a thin layer of dust. The bed was made, but the sheets looked undisturbed, like no one had touched them in decades. And the worst part, there was a rotting smell seeping from the closet. I ignored it and tried to sleep, but at 1:47 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps, slow, shuffling, coming from inside the room. I held my breath, too afraid to move. The closet door was open. I was sure I had closed it. The footsteps stopped, and then, in the darkness, I heard a whisper so close it felt like it was coming from inside my own head. You don't belong here. I scrambled out of bed, grabbed my keys, and bolted. I didn't even stop at the front desk. I just ran to my car and sped off. The next morning, I decided to call the motel. I needed answers. A woman picked up. Hi, I said. I stayed in room 303 last night. Silence. Then she spoke, her voice slow and careful. Sir, that's not possible. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, there is no room 303, she said. That hallway was sealed off 30 years ago. I hung up. And in my passenger seat, sitting right where I had left it, was the key to room 30. My name is Jenna, and I used to love old motels. The kind with neon signs and faded wallpaper, the kind that felt frozen in time. But after what happened at the Holloway Inn, I never stayed in one again. It was late when I checked in. The woman at the front desk gave me a strange look as she slid over my key. Room 217. You're the only guest tonight, she muttered. If you hear anything, just ignore it. That should have been my first warning. The room smelled like dust and old wood. The only thing that stood out was the mirror, huge antique thing bolted to the wall across from the bed. Its surface was slightly warped, like the glass was breathing. I felt uneasy but brushed it off. I turned off the lights and crawled into bed. At 2:47 a.m., I woke up. Something was moving in the mirror. I froze. The room was pitch dark, but the mirror wasn't. It showed my reflection, but the bed was empty. I sat up slowly, my breath shallow. My reflection did the same, but a second too late. Then it smiled at me. I wasn't smiling. I scrambled for the light, flicking it on. The mirror went back to normal. My reflection was just me. Heart pounding. I turned the mirror to face the wall. No way. I was sleeping with that thing watching me. At 3:12 a.m., the scraping started, a slow, dragging sound coming from behind the mirror. I grabbed my bag and bolted. The woman at the front desk didn't look surprised when I slammed the key. Down 217, she asked. I nodded, shaking. She sighed. That room's been empty for years. I pointed at the key. Then why did you give it to me? She gave me a tired look. I didn't. I turned and ran to my car. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw my reflection standing still, smiling back at me. My name is Mark, and I've worked the night shift at Ridgeway Motel for 3 years. I've dealt with all kinds of guests, drifters, truckers, people running from something. But one night, I checked in a man I'll never forget. He walked in around 2 a.m., tall, thin, wearing an old gray coat. His skin looked pale, almost gray, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. He didn't have any bags, just stood there, staring. One night, he said, his voice was wrong, hollow. I handed him the key to room 104. He didn't thank me, just turned and walked down the hall. An hour later, the phone at the front desk rang. I picked up. Ridgeway Motel. How can I help you? Silence then. A whisper. There's someone in my room. I checked the system. The call was coming from room 104. I frowned. He's calling about himself. I grabbed the spare key and walked down the hallway. The air felt colder near his door. Something smelled rotten. I knocked. Sir, is everything all right? No answer. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The room was empty, bed untouched, the closet door slightly ajar. A cold breeze slipped through the cracks. I stepped inside and flipped on the light. That's when I saw the guest book on the nightstand. It was old pages yellowed, ink smudged, and on the last line, I saw a name written in shaky handwriting. Mark Bennett, my name. The date next to it. March 12, 1987. 36 years ago. I stumbled back, heart pounding. That was impossible. Then I heard the closet door creak. I turned just in time to see a hand, thin, gray, reaching out before the lights flickered off. I don't remember running. I don't remember getting in my car. But somehow, I ended up speeding down the highway, the motel shrinking in my rearview mirror. The next morning, I called my manager, who booked room 104 last night. Silence then, in a quiet voice, he said, Mark, we don't have a room 104. I quit that same day. My name is Olivia. I was on my way to visit my sister when a storm forced me off the highway. The only place around was a rundown little motel called the Maple Rest. It had that old, forgotten look, but I had no choice. The man at the front desk barely spoke. He slid me the key to room 108 and muttered, "Checkouts at dawn." I didn't think much of it at the time. The room was what you'd expect: stained carpet, a flickering light, a musty smell. But the strangest part, there was no mirror. Not in the bathroom, not above the desk, nowhere. Just empty spaces where they should have been. I tried to sleep, but something felt off. The silence wasn't normal. No distant highway sounds, no humming pipes. Just a heavy stillness. At some point, I must have drifted off. Then, at 3:12 a.m., I woke up. The air was ice cold, and the bathroom door, which I had left open, was now shut. My pulse hammered. Slowly, I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. "Hello," I whispered. No answer. I slid out of bed and crept toward the door. My fingers barely brushed the handle when a shadow moved underneath it. Something was in there. I backed away, heart racing. The air in the room felt thicker, pressing against me. Then, I heard it, a low whisper coming from the other side of the door. "Time to check out." I ran, grabbed my keys, yanked open the motel room door, and bolted outside. Rain poured down, but I didn't care. I jumped into my car and sped off, my tires skidding on the wet pavement. As I glanced in the rearview mirror, my breath caught in my throat. The motel was gone. No building, no neon sign, just an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. But in my passenger seat, a room key sat on the cushion, room 108. My name is Rachel. I work as a housekeeper at the Oak Ridge Motel, a small roadside place with flickering lights and a lingering smell of mildew. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Most days are the same until I cleaned room 209. It started with a simple request. The front desk got a call. The guest in 209 needed extra towels. I grabbed a fresh set and knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Housekeeping. Still nothing. The air around the door felt heavy, like the room was swallowing sound. I tried. The handle unlocked. I pushed the door open an inch. "Sir, I have your towels." Silence. Then I heard it. Breathing. Slow. Wet. I stepped inside. The curtains were drawn, the air thick and musty. The bed was unmade, sheets bunched up like someone had just crawled out. But the room was empty. The bathroom door was half open. Inside, the mirror was fogged up, as if someone had just taken a hot shower. A single word was smeared onto the glass, written by a finger. "Leave." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I turned to leave, but then I saw it. The "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging on the inside of the door. But that wasn't the strange part. It was covered in dried blood. I ran out straight to the front desk. "Who's staying in 209? I asked. The receptionist frowned, flipping through the check-in log. Then she shook her head. "Room 209 hasn't been booked for 3 weeks. I quit that same night, but sometimes, when I drive past the motel, I see the light in 209 flicker on, and the "Do Not Disturb" sign still hangs on the door." My name is Daniel, and I've been a truck driver for over 15 years. I've seen some weird things on the road, but nothing compares to what happened at the Pinewood Inn. It was late, and I was too tired to keep driving. The motel was the only place 4 miles, an old 2-story building with a faded neon sign. The clerk barely looked at me as he handed over the key. Room 112. As I walked to my room, I noticed something strange. At the end of the long, dimly lit hallway, a man stood, completely still. He was tall, wearing an old suit that looked a few decades out of place. His head was slightly tilted, like he was listening. I gave him a nod. No reaction. Whatever. I went into my room, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed. The mattress was stiff. The air smelled damp, but I was too tired to care. I don't know how long I slept before I woke up to a soft knock, 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 knock. It wasn't at my door. It was coming from inside the room. I sat up, my heart pounding. The sound was coming from the closet. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The closet door was slightly open. I forced myself to stand. With a shaking hand, I reached out and pulled it open. Nothing, just empty hangers, swaying slightly, as if someone had just moved them. Then, from the hallway, knock, knock, knock. I turned toward the peephole and hesitated before looking through. The man in the suit was right outside my door, his head tilted further, unnatural, like his neck was breaking. I backed away, my breath coming in short gasps. Suddenly, the knocking stopped. The room fell silent. I don't know how long I stood there, waiting. But eventually, I worked up the courage to check the peephole again. The hallway was empty. I barely slept after that, and at sunrise, I packed up and left. As I handed my key back to the clerk, I hesitated. "That guy last night," I said. "The one in the suit. Who is he?" The clerk looked up, confused. "What guy?" "The man at the end of the hall. He was standing there when I checked in." Her face went pale. "Sir, that hallway has been closed off for years." I turned back toward the hallway. The end of the corridor was bricked up. I never stayed at another roadside motel again. My name is Eric. I travel a lot for work, so I've stayed in more motels than I can count. Most of them are forgettable, just places to sleep for the night. But there's one I'll never forget. The place that changed everything. It was a last-minute booking on a long, empty road. The sign read Sunset Pines Motel, and the neon light flickered weakly in the cold night air. It looked old, run down, but I didn't care. I just needed sleep. The woman at the front desk gave me a key. Without a word. Room 36. The last room at the end of the hallway. The carpet smelled damp, and the walls had a strange yellowish tint. I shrugged it off, dragged my bag inside, and locked the door. That's when I noticed it. The closet door was open slightly. I don't know why, but it made me uneasy. I walked over, pulled it open wider, and saw nothing, just darkness. But the air inside smelled different, stale, like something had been sealed in for years. I shut the door and got into bed. The exhaustion hit me fast. My eyes closed. Then I heard it, a soft click. The closet door had opened. Again, I sat up, my heart pounding. Maybe the door was broken. Maybe I hadn't closed it all the way. That had to be it. I got up, walked over, and pulled the door shut. This time, I wedged a chair under the handle. No more surprises. I lay back down. Silence. Then, around 3 a.m., I woke up freezing. The room was ice cold. My breath came out in misty puffs, and the chair. It was moved. The closet door was wide open, and someone was standing inside. I couldn't move. The figure was tall, its face hidden in shadows. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. Then it stepped forward. The last thing I remember was its hand reaching for me. I woke up in my car, parked outside the motel. My bags were already in the passenger seat. The motel was abandoned, the neon sign shattered, the windows broken. The entire building looked like it had been empty for years. But I know what I saw. I stayed there, and something stayed with me.